Okay, thanks, Julie. All know me by now, but I'd like to introduce Eric Krohn, who is the Director of Programming and one of the mentors at the incubator. He's also an entrepreneur in his own right, has a few, I don't know, a dozen businesses at any given time hanging in there.
Yeah.
So Richard, and he's going to lead this session for us.
Well, thanks, Laura, and thank you, Julie, and everyone else for joining us this morning. It's too easy to say yes to a session like this because I just love ideation. So I thought to start with, let's just look at that word for a second and think about what the heck is ideation? Well, let me just get rid of, there you go. Usually that shows up on people's screens. It kind of sounds like a fancy word for idea, but in fact, I consider that word a term for a process. It's very easy to come up with ideas. I mean, we come up with thousands of ideas all day long. Most of them we don't share with people because it's not worth sharing with people. But ideation is a process to formulate an idea that's worth taking action on. So to illustrate how I go about ideation, I thought that we could do it all as a class. So Julie, I'll have you help from the background there. But I'm gonna go over the three main parts of ideation, and then we might as well just all do it together this morning, because what is it, 8 o'clock, the first week of 2021, you know, let's get some work done. So the very first step is listening or identifying a problem. So this is probably the most important step out of the entire process, and the one that most people don't choose to actually follow. So what happens mostly as an inventor or an innovator, entrepreneur, we come up with this great idea and we're like, hey, this is awesome. You know, let me ask my parents or my best friend, find out, you know, hey, do you like this idea? And if so, then I'm going to do it, because I'm sure other people are going to like it too. Well, and that statement is the problem. A long time ago, we used to, as a corporate America, we would just make things and then pay tons of marketing firms and all these other people to find the people that are going to want to pay for whatever we just made. And we learned that only worked for so long, and it just wastes money and got a lot of people fired because they couldn't find the people, because there wasn't people. And we identified a new process where instead of coming up with something and then finding people to buy it, we found out what people were asking for, and then we made that so much easier. But that's not usually how we allow ourselves to innovate or invent things. And so when I say we have to listen or use an identified problem, you have to talk to people or listen to people, really, and find out what people are complaining about the most. What's bothering people? I mean, there's so many things out there that we could be like stepping on Legos. Well, it'd be awesome if I had a thing to, you know, clean up Legos off the floor so I don't step on them. Boom, now we have Roomba vacuums. I'm not sure that's exactly why they made it, but it could have been. But that's the idea. They didn't just make this product and then say, oh, it's wicked cool, people are going to want this. They probably listened to millions of people that didn't have time to vacuum their floors, or, you know, no one's home, they don't want to pay for a maid service. So, hey, what if we had this robotic version that could do it? And so what we have to do is find a problem, or there's lots of problems already out there that people have identified. We could use one of those. So that's the most important part. Find a problem that people are talking about. The second part is identifying what is the core of that problem. It's not just to say, oh, I don't have time to vacuum my floors, I'm too busy. The core of the problem is people want to have a nice looking home and are too busy working to afford to do, you know, there's all these different psychological aspects behind why we have problems. And we have to summarize that. We have to be able to make one sentence that says, this is the problem for this group of people. And it's very hard, honestly, to be able to chop a statement down to really identify what is the core of this problem. But that's the most, that is the step that we have to take in order to find the solution to the problem. The next step is brainstorming. Now, instead of explaining this part now, I figured it'd be a lot easier if we explain it throughout an exercise, because there's actually two parts. So now I'm going to turn the tables back to the class here for a second. What is a problem? I mean, you know, there's lots of stuff going on in the world, but if I were to turn the question to you guys, tell me, what problem are you hearing about the most? And this is an actual question, so I'm going to expect an answer in the next 5 minutes. But what problem do you hear people complaining about the most?
You guys can put it in the chat. You can tell me.
Cue Jeopardy music.
Probably if you talk instead of typing it in the chat, but if you're more comfortable with that. You guys thought about lots of problems last summer. When we were trying to figure out what you could do for junior achievement. Big problems. What problems? What problems did we come up with?
It might be, hold on, pull the chat up, see a few coming up.
Yes.
Huh.
Remember when we were talking about like the discomfort? Like if you're talking about a tangible product, like the discomfort stuff that we didn't end up doing anything really with, but
Okay, I'm liking these. And my marker's getting duller as we go down. Solution, I like that.
Public safety is in there, Eric. You might have missed.
Police at the top there, sanitation. All right, this is good. Let's roll with one of these.
yeah, big ones.
So we got a bunch on the board here. Why don't you guys in maybe by raise of hands to make it easier, which one should we try to tackle this morning? I can tell you, which came out pretty light, may not be the easiest to tackle, but you never know. Why don't we pick kids in Zoom? How about I pick for everybody? Unless you want to overrule me, which you can.
You guys want to overrule Eric or you wanted to go with that? Thumbs up? They're all giving me thumbs up.
All right. You can always overrule me by yelling out answers. All right. Kids Zoom. Next part. What's the problem? Right. Trying to keep them enthused or entertained, but what is the problem? So let's hear some statements. Loss of focus. So before we move past that, why is there a loss of focus? What are they focusing on that they're losing the focus? Sitting too long, I like, really to the point. Distractions, I like that. Zoom itself. Okay, this is good. Let's keep moving from this. Great job. I think the core one that we're going to talk about will be distractions. You know, a boring movie and I'm dancing around not watching it, but a good movie I'm certainly able to sit down and watch. So let's look at this. All right, next series of questions. What's distracting kids? Open my chat back up. Pets, I like that. People. Other programs on the computer, outside environment. That probably means they're bored with whatever they're watching, social media, so they're looking for something more exciting to do. Anything else? What is distracting people? What about us? Tired? Toys? Motivation? Okay, good. Let's roll with this. I like where this is going. Let me make a little more room on this board now. Okay. Now we are down to, let me just get rid of this chat. The brainstorm section. So this is a really fun one for me to talk about because it gets to, I get to talk about a technique that a person that is actually at the incubator that I admire entirely came up with one of these types of brainstorm. And the other one is something that I've just learned through working with startups, either myself or now with the incubator and are around me. But in fact, we kind of need both of these techniques for brainstorming in order to really try to figure out, can we pull off a company with whatever our solution is? So the first one, and we don't necessarily have to get too deep into it because it could take a while. I'm going to call the Inventors Matrix, but this is the one that is from the gentleman, Mark Pearson, who is in our incubator. He's a master inventor by title from IBM. So pretty awesome. And this is, it works very well when you're inventing things, maybe not always the best for social change, but we're going to give it a small try here. But essentially what we have to do is make a matrix. So if I were to group some of these, people is obviously being distracted by things in their environment. Lack of excitement might be relating to the experience of the actual Zoom call. Zoom experience, which I hope we're not having right now. Tiredness. Well, there's not a lot I can do for people's sleep, but perhaps with the proper motivation and excitement, some of this will be taken care of. So here is the matrix. And this is going to be a lot more. Let me pull my chat up because now it's going to get wordier and wordier as we go forward. There we go. So now what I need is random brainstorm words. I want one word, and I want you to throw words out that you think would help someone on Zoom, a kid on Zoom, ignore the environment, find the Zoom experience more exciting, more motivational. Perhaps toys could be, you know, one of the things you throw out there. But I just want one word of possible solutions to doing this. So I can help by throwing one out. So let's throw out the word gamify. It's hard to see that, but so perhaps if we gamified the Zoom experience. Okay, here they're coming up. Activities, engagement, competition. So let's get more specific. What activity? What kind of competition? Prizes, I like that. That's specific. Incentives. Good. What would make it animation? Sure, I like that. You know, I can pay $2 and have my Amazon Alexa sound like Samuel L. Jackson. That would certainly keep me up at morning meetings. So, you know, animation right along that same line. These are good. Activities. Can you think of an actual activity though? Games, I like that. Now let's keep going here. Breaks. Okay, so now I'm gonna start going across. Keep going with the words. I know it's hard in the morning. Movement. Ooh. I like that. Exercise, yes. Okay, give me one more. Music, how about with pride? Ooh, that's interesting. Good one. Okay. This is how the matrix works. Oof, food. Let's throw food in there. I love food. Okay, a little hard to see it on the bottom, but it's in there. So this is how it works, and this is just the first process of the Inventors Matrix. But what we have to do is end up putting these together. So if we could gamify breaks, gamify movement, gamify exercise, gamify pride. If we could have prizes during our breaks, prizes with movement, prizes with exercise, prizes with pride. Incentives during our breaks, incentives for movement, incentives for exercise, incentives for pride. Animation during our breaks, movement, exercise. I think you get the point. And after we end up filling out this chart where we're just slapping words together, we start to look through this and say, well, do we have anything here? So we could gamify breaks. That sounds kind of cool. If there was some sort of prizes for movement, that would be awesome. I kind of like that. Perhaps there was animations that gave us some sort of pride based on, you know, the skills that you're learning, or whatever would keep, you know, the kids more engaged with the programming. Maybe they would have pride afterwards for winning a badge or a certificate or something like that. And so this is the Inventors Matrix. So what happens now is we kind of put all this together and say, well, what are some ways that I can innovate prizes during breaks for kids that are on Zoom calls? Or how can I somehow add prizes if the kids move around during Zoom calls? And this is how we begin to actually formulate innovative ideas, because we're just pairing things. So when you really get going on this idea, you should have 100 words going on both axes. And then you put them together and then go through, and, you know, there's going to be some repeats. There's going to be points where it just makes zero sense. But the sillier you get with the words you put into the matrix, more innovation you will actually find coming out of it. And so this is the Inventors Matrix from Mark Pearson. If you really want to get specific, you could do completely silly things by saying, you know, skateboard, video game, baseball, soda pop, and just put all sorts of weird words and weird words everywhere and just see what sort of ideation you get from it. So the other step, which luckily I don't need to write out because probably can't read it anyways, is one that I believe in it, and one that I use a lot with our companies, and I call it resource building. So we can come up with awesome ideas on how we can create animations with our exercise. know how to program animations, though. I could probably do the exercise part, but it takes resources to do that. So because I don't know how to do that, that probably won't be a solution that I chase after. So what I'm saying is, when you identify a problem that people have stated to you and you start to brainstorm solutions, I want you to also write down what sort of resources you actually have. Maybe you have a whole class that you get to work with. So you have brain power. That's awesome. Or you know, you could utilize the class to do one thing, to go out and do this and go here and go there. Much easier than if you were a team of one. You could have, you know, a whole lumber yard at your disposal. And so, you know, maybe the solution is making some cool computer stands or something that has games and movement attached with how they were built. If that's not a resource I have, not to mention I certainly don't have the skills to build a table, but that's why I'm not going to pursue that. So resource building is extremely important so that we don't find this awesome solution and realize that we don't have a way to get to the end with that solution. However, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't. You can just add more people to your team. But realizing what you have and what your solution is going to require is very important, because without that, it can be very difficult to reach the end. So here we are. We've identified, we're going to, let's just say we're going to gamify the breaks in order to keep kids motivated and excited while they're on Zoom. Now we move to the next step. We got to talk to people again, right? We should probably go and talk to teachers and students and find out if that's something that even interests them. It's great that we came up with that. We know that it's a problem. We think this is an innovative way of solving that problem. But if you don't go back to who your future customers might be, there's no way to learn if it's actually true. So you can end up spending all sorts of time chasing something that, again, I don't know if my customer is actually going to want that. And so there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of judge whether that whole question and answer process with these people went well. And so there's scorecards that you can find on the internet or through different books that kind of help you score the value that you kind of felt from that possible customer. But honestly, I think the best thing to do is, after talking to a bunch of folks that you think are your future customers, to go back and talk to your peers. Be like, this is what I brought to them. This is what they said about it. They were excited about this, not excited about that. They suggested this. I don't know if I can do it. We have to learn. And when you summarize kind of that set of learning, you have to repeat this whole process again. Seriously, it's so much work. But this is what kind of makes this the scientific method, right? So what we're doing is coming up with a hypothesis. When we listen to people and listen to the problems they're telling us, we start to come up with this idea like, this is something that people are begging for a solution for. And then we start to summarize what the core of that problem is. So perhaps the core problem for us today is that when kids are taking their classes on Zoom, the methodology that the teacher's using, or maybe even the technology, is boring. And I don't mean to bust on anyone, because this could be totally boring for you folks, and I do this all day. It could be us. So how do we improve that? We have to come up with a hypothesis. My hypothesis is that if we gamify the breaks that kids are having, it keeps them on Zoom and they have fun, and maybe that game is actually them moving in some sort of way. And I bet they would stay more focused on the actual Zoom call. So to do that, I'm going to, come up with this cool game, which we don't necessarily have to come up with that solution now. And, you know, maybe I'll draw some pictures to illustrate how that game works, because I'm not going to pull all my resources at this point to go and make this game, but I can draw it out on pictures and be able to describe it. And then I'm going to go talk to people. I'm going to find out, hey, you know, would movement help keep you motivated, focused? Do you find yourself falling asleep from sitting there all day long, not actually getting up and dancing around? And really, we need to find out, okay, how is that solution? How could it fit what people want better? And then go back to the old brainstorming and see if you can refine it again. And then go back, talk to people, find out if it's ready, and then try a pilot of it. Do some sort of MVP, a very simple way to illustrate what your solution is. And either at that point, make it happen, or go back to the brainstorming again. And there's nothing wrong repeating this process over and over. And in fact, once you actually put out your first product, you're probably going to want to repeat this over and over, because people change. And so to stay on top of always providing what they want, we have to constantly reassess what they're asking for. And so essentially, all of this that we just did is that simple word, ideation. This is the process of turning an idea into a product or solution that people are asking for and are willing to pay for. So don't forget, also, when you're out there talking to people, let's keep in mind, hopefully more than 50% out of your group that you're going to talk to want this. So, you know, often we talk to lots of people, but we don't, it's hard to put metrics to that, to say, well, if I talk to 20 people, how many out of them should say I want this? Because if only 2 people out of 20 say they want it, well, maybe it's not a better solution than what's currently out there. So we should always aim for 60%, you know, 50%, something like that. Because you really want people to be saying, wow, that is the solution I have been asking for. And in the end, that is what ideation is about. That is the solution I have been asking for. But it came from someone else, because they listened to you and they brainstormed on how to provide that in the best way. So with that, is there any questions that I can answer about this process? And you can shout them out or chat them out, whatever is easiest.
If you want to type it, you can just say it and I can repeat it to Eric.
I was just gonna ask him, like, has he had like companies come out of this? Like, more curious, like what
The question was, have you had companies come out of this process and it's worked? And if so, what were their products or services?
I would say any company that has innovated a solution has done this process in some sort of way. So is it the one that I used? I don't know, because most of the time when people come to me at the incubator, they have already moved past this process and are starting businesses on top of it. But I will say that if we move past this from an inventing idea and use it more from the business model idea, this is exactly what we do on a daily basis. So we have one company who works with some really neat visual technology, and they originally pointed their technology towards a teaching solution. And they ran all sorts of seminars talking to teachers, talking to students, actually very similar to today's example, where it's about what would engage students more. But in the end, what he was hearing back was they weren't ready in the teaching scenario. It was actually more from a training and manufacturing scenario. And so from there, we have to identify, well, what's the core problem? Well, the problem is there's a bottleneck in training. It's very expensive and takes a very long time to train people. So what's the brainstorm? He actually, in a way, gamified the training process through virtual reality. And you add metrics to it and studies, and now this is what people had been asking for, and it's a solution to this expensive bottleneck problem. And so that's a way of using this in your business model after you've actually created your original solution. Ooh, I like that one. More people is always better. If you, if this whole class were to find, it would be the 3rd floor, the biggest wall in the incubator, sorry, Laura, and brought some markers up there, non-permanent. And as a group, you decided to find one problem, summarize the core, and then go through the Inventors Matrix and try to do 100 words on both axes and see all the different possible solutions. All the brainstorms is what they are, and work that out. That is way more valuable than just a single person, because it's just me pulling up words. But what we need is some sort of synergistic brain trust to come in and, like, you know, the more words, a brainstorm, you know, a storm is not, you know, a few drops on the ground, right? A storm is lots of rain coming down on you. And that's what a brainstorm is supposed to be. It's supposed to be just crazy random ideas, unrefined, raw, veridical thoughts, because we refine them later on. So absolutely, as a group is always better. And it's way more fun, way more fun. Get some popcorn, not coffee, could get a little crazy, but brainstorming with a group is one of the best things ever. Good question.
What other questions?
Apparently, I need to start gamifying my workshops.
They had a big day yesterday. I drained them of all their energy.
No, I think this is, the suggestions were great. I mean, you made it very easy for me.
What other questions? do you
As
guys-
solutions for my handwriting, that would be even better.
The question is, how long do you anticipate this process taking?
That's a really good question. Time is certainly the hardest thing to answer when it comes to innovating or business. I mean, 2 days, a week, a month, it really all depends on, is the solution good enough? And so I don't think it's actually the role of the innovator to decide when you can move past this brainstorming process. It really should be the people you're talking to. If you talk to 100 people, literally, and they all tell you, you know, that the solution is exactly what they've been looking for, they don't have any suggestions, you know, I'll prepay you money right now for that solution. Great, stop this process, go make the solution, go make some money, then go back to it to see if you have to refine it, you know, a year later. It really, I think, to answer that question, you're done brainstorming when your customers give you money or promise to buy it or something along that line. Hold on, I'm reading the chat here.
I'll just jump in on that answer for a second. I was part of a brainstorming session at the university where they were talking about a very technical problem that needed to be solved. They brought in faculty from all different departments, and it was actually a lawyer that was the moderator of the session. And that took months. So it really depends on what problem you're trying to solve, who you're trying to solve it with. Are you actually trying to solve the technical piece or just come up with a solution and then figure it out? There's a lot of variables there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Another question I liked that I saw up there. How do you know if your core problem is big enough or too small? Excellent question. We do a lot of that work with the incubator companies, taking that idea of, you know, who are my first customers locally, what market can I grow to, and how big is the ultimate market eventually for everyone, not just me. So let's say we wanted to start a restaurant, and let's say, you you know, I want to start an Irish restaurant. There's a couple Irish folks in my community here. Let's do it. Well, unfortunately, there's also 5 other Irish restaurants locally. So how many people are asking for a 6th or 7th Irish restaurant? What I'm saying here is when you talk to people, you need to find out how many are willing to be your customer. And while they might like Irish restaurants, they may not be asking for a 6th or 7th one. Maybe they're saying, boy, I wish I had, you know, Turkish food. So what you have to do is find out how big is that market? How many people are asking for it? And can you go other places? So it's always scary when someone comes up with a product that is only valid in the city they live in. Might be easy and fun. You know, if I can get 20% of the city I live in, you know, I'd be famous here. But it's not scalable, and it may not last forever because it doesn't have any room to grow. So we have to, when we identify the core problem and start talking to people, try to find the homogenous group. And that's kind of a weird way to use that, perhaps, that term, but what it means is, so if we could use our example here, kids that are on Zoom. Well, if we started this project before we knew COVID was going to happen, there probably wasn't a whole lot of kids on Zoom. So that would not have been a very good business move, because who's on Zoom? Most people weren't even using Zoom, I don't think. Now, if we're trying to come up with something for kids using Zoom, look at the sample. All kids are on Zoom now because of what's happening. Will they be in 3 years? I don't know. I don't know what that mix will be. It's probably not the same. So as we approach this company idea, you know, great right now. Again, if you have the resources built to do this now, would have been better if you started 3 years ago, and it probably won't be so great if you start 3 years from now. And that's kind of the idea of how you have to approach, is my market big enough? Is there enough people out there literally that want this? And is that a growing thing or a declining thing? All right, what else do I have here in chat? Hopefully that answered it for you. Okay, I like this. What do people do when they get stuck? I have certainly been there. The company that I started, that I met Laura with and really did well and got me started on the whole entrepreneurial thing. When I started, it was with a professor friend of mine, and involved a whole lot of physics and math and stuff. And I remember waiting on my porch. A friend was gonna write a check to become part of the company. Everything was great, and I get a call, and he says, "Look, I'm hanging out with this rocket scientist friend of mine," literally, and he said the math doesn't work. You know, this invention won't work if we build it. And I was crushed. You know, first of all, call my friend and say, don't stop by. But, you know, I thought that this invention was done at that time, because I'm not a professor. You know, I wasn't doing the design work that he was. So kind of sucky, right? But there's very healthy ways to move past that instead of quitting. What I did was just study. Just went back and studied how things move. This was a thermodynamic thing. So not that I understand most of what Tesla wrote, but I just studied his different inventions. And really, it's just, if I can't come up with a game that gamifies break, well, maybe I can just suggest something, or maybe there's a different way of going around that game, or maybe I find a game that I don't have to actually do any programming. Maybe it's actually something you can just mail people. But it's just going back and spending time studying and finding a different way to get around that roadblock. And if you continually do that, if you just say, I'm never going to give up, I'm just going to keep taking every little step forward that I can. Maybe it takes one day, maybe it takes a week, maybe it takes 3 months to take your next step forward. But as long as you don't stop walking, you're always going to eventually reach the end. And so go back and study, talk to more people, go to workshops that are talking about the subject matter, but just always try to find something that gives you that one step forward on your path to the goal. And I think I'm out of questions. Is there any other questions I can answer? Anyone here know how to gamify breaks on Zoom?
Have any programmers in my group? Couple are like, yeah.
It's a good time to come up with a quick game. Yep, good question about resources, when you should say, I don't have the resources to pull this off, or too expensive. I'll touch on the expensive one first. When we're coming up with solutions or inventing things that might possibly be very expensive, we often think that we have to hurry up and raise enough money to actually make this device so that we can then show people and then raise millions of dollars and go on Shark Tank and sell it for $1 gazillion. You don't have to do that. You can just draw it on a piece of paper, or you can actually have people test your design for an invention all on paper or in a computer. And we've seen this. We had someone at the incubator last year come with this brilliant clean energy device. It was all on paper. There was nothing built, but he had people actually tested it in a virtual setting, and he was able to have all these different things and raise money. And it was almost like we were looking at the invention, but it was on paper. So when it comes to funding, try to go as far as you can without spending a single dollar. Really, be as cheap as possible. Talking to people doesn't cost money. Drawing things on paper doesn't cost money. When it comes to actually, having to invent it or move forward, for this, it's a gas burner that the reference I was using before for my invention. My first model was a rotating chair with a blowtorch and some copper piping duct tape to it. Well, it probably wasn't duct tape because that would melt, and I have videos of it and everything. And that was my MVP. That cost me nothing because it was just junk I had in the basement. I probably got yelled at for the junk that I then turned it into afterwards, but that's besides the point. But that's how you get around money. It's called making an MVP, your minimum viable product. As far as when to say, I can't go forward because I don't have those resources. I mean, it depends on the roadblock. If you're trying to, make a time machine and you can't find a flux capacitor, that sounds like a pretty big roadblock in your resource building. So you might have to think of something else, maybe a different movie. But if it's out there, if money can buy it and it's not exotic or illegal, you build it on paper. And if it looks good and you create a great argument for it on paper, then you start to pitch competitions, you look for grants. There's all sorts of programs that will help you get money into your bank account so that you can actually turn it into a tangible solution. But try to not spend $1 until you have to. Absolutely, save your money. Pay people instead. All right, new questions?
Yes. Any other questions?
I love that you brought up Elon Musk though, because it's just absolutely brilliant. But he did create that underground train there. I forgot what it's called, but it's our government that usually owns the land, so he still needs partners to actually give him the tunnels and stuff. But he has the resources of money. So in his case, he can do things like that because that's his resource is money. It's actually quite brilliant. And I love his company, so.
Any other questions? They're probably racking their brains right now, thinking of starting the process.
I hope they do. It really is a fun one to go through.
Any others? No? I think they're,
I have a comment, not a question, but what about incorporating ideation into Zoom sessions
Ooh, I like
for
that.
teachers? I mean, this got you thinking, right? It kept your attention for the most part. I saw a couple people nodding off here and there, but for the most part, probably a little more engaging than a lecture or something like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Laura. They the back and forth of mental power usually keeps people very focused, and if we could do that more, I think we could get through this whole Zoom reality. Maybe we need some flashing lights on computers now or something.
How about a piece of software that doesn't let you open any other software while you're on Zoom?
Ooh,
At
that
least
sounds dangerous.
school provided laptops. Yeah, school provided laptops.
and they won't be able to share any of
Automatically
their
not disturb.
stuff.
I like it.
That's a thing already? One of them said that's a thing already. They use it for college finals. And
Oh,
AP
darn
exam.
it. I just wasn't.
Well, how about we
Good
could
idea. I know
judge how long eyeballs are on the screen, and you get a prize the longest your eyes are staring at the screen.
Hear that? How long your eyeballs are actually focused on the screen. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. I want to thank all of you for sticking with me throughout this. And I really hope that you use these techniques as you approach thinking about entrepreneurship or innovation in the future, because the brain is able to do amazing things, especially when you exercise it with other people. And to turn that all into reality, it's all about resources. And just remember that, especially in this area, people are by far the greatest resource. Classes like this, the education Julie's giving you, and the time, what Laura's giving to all of us with her work with the incubator, it's people like this that we have to strive to go and find, because they will help you turn brainstorms into reality. So thank you very much for giving me the chance to explain it.
Thank you very much.
I'll just close by adding on to what Eric said. Don't forget that the brain is a muscle. You have to exercise it. And there is scientific proof of that. So the more you do something like this, the better off you are for your own health, as well as possibly the world.
Absolutely. Well said.
We're here to support you guys always.
Thank you, Laura.